I'm here with Milt Thomas, and he's going to talk a little bit about his experience in World War II. My first question is, what branch were you in, and did you volunteer to go into that branch, or were you drafted?
First of all, the branch I ended up in was at that time known as the Air Corps. It during the war changed to become the Air Force. I was in college in the year 1941. I was a reserve officer trainee called ROTC, and I had trained to be a anti-aircraft and seacoast artillery officer, and I had already been to camp for that training. But because I was in engineering school, when the war was declared, they almost immediately sent out officers to the colleges to canvass candidates who were going to become second lieutenants with an engineering degree to volunteer into the Air Force. So I volunteered and was accepted into the Air Force.
How old were you when you first came into the Air Corps?
I was 21 years old. Oh, yeah, 21 years old.
When World War II came around, were you excited to see some action, or were you scared of being killed?
Well, the war had started when I went into the service, and my first duty station was with an information and filter center, which was about as peaceful an assignment as you could have. In those days, they thought that the enemy might send aircraft anywhere along the coastline. So my station was Wilmington, North Carolina. The duty was to plot all kinds of aircraft, and including any enemy sightings. Information was fed to it from the radar facility at Fort Fisher, which was about 30 miles south of Wilmington. It should have been very pleasant duty because all they had there were volunteer ladies, and I was 21 years old, and there was a war going on, and I figured, geez, I ought to be able to do something better than that. So I asked the CO if I couldn't do something a little closer to the military. So I was assigned as the CO of the detached radar platoon at Fort Fisher. And I did that for about 4 or 5 months. What that consisted of was about 15 minutes of military work where I signed most of the reports prepared by the first sergeant, and the rest of the day I went fishing.
Did any of your close friends die, and if so, how?
Not when they were in my immediate command. For example, my best friend was killed at an airplane crash, but in this country. He was he was trained as a gunner, and they were on a volunteer flight mission when, I don't know any of the details, the plane crashed and he was killed. I had other friends who were navigators with me who were killed mostly in troop carrier assignments.
What are troop carrier assignments?
Troop carriers were, well, they're the ones that navigated the gliders that landed the troops, and they were just like cannon fodder. They were just killed right and left. So I lost a few friends that way.
What was your closest experience of being shot down? Did you shoot any other planes down?
First of all, I was not in a combat branch. I was in the business of delivering aircraft to whatever theaters required them. I served as a navigator, and we were crewed up for whatever missions were required. I made 5 round trips to Australia, I made a trip to England, I made a trip to Africa, among others, before I was assigned to Africa. So we were not in a shooting mode. The closest I came to shooting was when we were delivering a B-26 aircraft. We were in Marrakesh in North Africa, And because of the distance at that time from Miracatch to London, or wherever we had to deliver the airplane, happened to be, it was Manchester, the range of the aircraft was such that it was marginal if we had headwinds. Besides that, at the time we were doing this, which was early 1944, we had to go up what's called the 10th parallel, which means that we went out to the west, then north, to stay as far away from France as we could before we cut in to go to England. The reason for that was that they had fighters and they would come out and knock us off. We were not normally armed. So for this one mission, we were all given ammunition for our machine guns on the B-26. None of us were really trained for the machine guns, so they said we could fire a few rounds to test out the guns. So we're up flying along and these guys are testing the guns. They almost shot us down, so we came close to getting shot down by our own people.
Since you were Jewish, did you experience any anti-Semitism?
Not once did I experience any, but I must confess, apparently I don't look Jewish, and so nobody even asked me if I was Jewish. The only way they would know would be by looking at we used to wear dog tags, their identification, and your religious preference is imprinted on it. But other than that, I never experienced any anti-Semitism.
How is being in the military different than what you thought it would be?
Basically, I found it boring.
What was your favorite and least favorite part of being in the Air Corps?
Well, the traveling was my favorite part, and the least favorite part was when I was stationed in Africa doing routine office work in navigation.
How did being in the military help you later in life?
Well, it provided me with an opportunity that I might not ever have had, and that is, after completing my service, all of the GIs were offered what's called the GI Bill, which I took advantage of. I was in college when the war, or D-Day, started, the invasion of December 7th, 1941, and I was one of the early graduates who were pushed ahead. I would have graduated in June of 1942. With the war on, they accelerated our class, and I was graduated the end of April and on duty May the 4th, 1942. But the opportunity that I got was that when I got out of the service, I had never practiced being an engineer or worked or what have you after having graduated. I was able then to go into graduate school, take an advanced degree, which I took. I took an industrial management with a master's in business at the University of Southern California, and that afforded me a really wonderful opportunity to get my feet on the ground and get started again.
Did you ever make any mistakes in being a navigator, like going in the wrong direction?
I had two boo-boos that I have to take credit for, and if you're interested, I'll tell you how they happened.
Gotcha.
We were flying on what's dead reckoning from Leopoldville to Johannesburg, which is a easy run, and we could keep contact with the ground, and I had given the pilot a heading, and I said, look, see that thing? That's a railroad. I said, stay with the railroad and don't get off the railroad, and in 15 minutes you'll come into Johannesburg and you'll find the field and land. That's when I got stupid. I went back and sat down, and I'm looking out, and I'm looking out the window, and all of a sudden I'm looking out and we're not anywhere. We're out way to hell and gone, and I don't know where we are. So I go up to see the pilot and I said, hey, what the hell did you do when I asked you to follow the railroad? He said, well, I turned on the radio compass, and just with that I looked, and the radio compass is a direction finding thing, and all of a sudden it swings around, and that means we went over the transmitter, And I looked out, I said, where in the hell are we? He says, I don't know, I just tuned in on the radio compass. We're lost now. He didn't do what I told him, that doesn't make any difference. I didn't get him to Johannesburg. I told him what to do, but he didn't follow my orders. So we had to call Johannesburg and get a radio beacon sent out, and then we zeroed in and got back to Johannesburg. But it's my responsibility, and the fact that he didn't follow my orders, it doesn't make any difference. That was number one boo-boo.
What was number two boo-boo?
Oh, number two boo-boo. We were flying north towards Malakal in the Anglo-Egyptian Sudan, and it was a flight with a bunch of what's called brass, high officers, and they wanted to see the Victoria Falls. However, on the way up to the Victoria Falls, we told them that there were elephants down below, and so they said, let's go way down and take a look at them. So we went down to about 50 feet and start chasing elephants, and you can't navigate when you're just zooming around. So they said, okay, let's go to the Victoria Falls. So I told the pilot to go north. So we went north, and there was a river that goes east-west across the course we were taking, and the falls were on it, but I had no idea of where we were now because they'd been screwing around chasing elephants. So I flipped a coin in my head and I said, go east. So we went east and we didn't find anything. So we had to call Victoria Falls to get a location. I found out it was the other way, so we had to turn around and go back down the river the other way. So that's also my fault. Even though I wasn't navigating to get there, we were chasing around on the ground, and I made a bum guess. So I take credit for that too.
Can you show me some of your pictures and talk about them?
This is a picture album I started when I was in the military. I took a bunch of manila folders and made it into an album. My camera was not of good quality, so the pictures aren't great. Starting this thing, there was one of 5 round trips I made to Australia, and this is what my quarters looked like when I was doing navigation. This happens to be Canton Island, which is like a rock. Various pictures taken along Waikiki Beach.
Is that you?
That's me, a little thinner than I am now. This happens to be in Leopoldville and Elizabethville. This is in Nairobi, in Kenya. And these pictures, although not good, are of Kilimanjaro. We were flying at first at 12,000 feet, then at 14,000 feet. We never cleared the mountain. I don't know what the elevation was. It was the highest mountain at the time in Africa. Here are a few pictures that were taken of various scenes in Africa. This is called a Youbangees.
Oh, who is the lady?
A nurse on a base. I always managed to find a lady somewhere. This was me in my room with the mosquito netting when I was in Africa. I had no clothes on most of the time. It's so goddamn hot there. This was a nurse at in Africa there. This was my roommate. This was my good friend Alan Shamovitz, who was killed during the war. I mentioned him earlier. This is when I visited Cairo on military duty. That's the Sphinx.
This is part 2 with my interview with Milt Thomas. He was born in 1920, and he will be sharing his experience in World War II. My first question for the second part of the interview is, what, in your opinion, was the biggest event in World War II, and what were the dates?
In my opinion, the most important events were the dropping of the 2 atomic bombs. The first was, to the best of my recollection, in early August or thereabouts of 1945, and then within about 2, 3, or 4 weeks, the second bomb was dropped.
Mm-hmm.
to me, those were the most important events associated with the war because it brought about quickly the end of the war.
Okay, my second question is, were you under the command of any famous generals, and what were their names?
Well, I was in the Air Force, and although he didn't know I was in it, it was commanded by General Hap Arnold.
Mm-hmm. What was he like?
I never knew him. He was supposed to be a great general.
Okay. Did you visit any famous places, and when did you visit them?
Because I was in the Air Transport Command, I traveled quite a bit of the world. I visited, if you want to call it that, London. I hit most of the major islands that were involved in the war. Honolulu, Hickam Field, Guam, Guadalcanal, Midway, and many of those. I also visited in Africa, where I was stationed. I visited Victoria Falls, Nairobi, Johannesburg, Cape Town, and I also went to Cairo, where I saw the Sphinx and the pyramids. I could go on about any number of places, but those are outstanding.
Did you ever go to D-Day?
Did I go to D-Day?
Like the spot, the beach where D-Day happened?
No, I never visited.
Where was that?
I'm not sure, but I think it was called Omaha Beach, but I'm not sure that's the one where the landing took place.
Okay. Thank you, Milt, for sharing your experiences in the war with me. I think me and my classmates will enjoy the final product, and I really appreciate that you sacrificed for our country, and this is the end of the video.